Hey, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am very excited because today's guest, perhaps more than any other person beyond my wife, has had, without knowing it, an unbelievably profound impact on my life, on my career, and how I think about and pursue self-expression. His name is Steven Pressfield. He's a novelist, he's a screenwriter, and the guy behind some of the most important nonfiction books on creativity that I have ever read, including, of course, The War of Art, which you've likely heard me talk about quite frequently on the podcast because it impacted me so deeply. It's a book all about how to bring voice to and manifest your best, most creative self. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about creativity more generally. We're going to talk about Steven's brand new book, A Man at Arms, which is fantastic. Everybody check that out. I hold this man and his work in the absolute highest regard. I can't thank him enough for the gift of his work. It truly did change my life, and I'm super honored to have him on the show to share his wisdom with all of you guys today. So hit that subscribe button, and please, only takes a second. Let's do the thing. This is me and Steven Pressfield. Steven, I can't tell you how happy I am to meet you and to have you here. It's such a privilege and such an honor. Before we get into it, there's a little bit of construction next door. They told us they were going to knock it off, but we'll see how that goes. So for people that are listening or watching, if you hear some sawing in the background, not much we can do about it. We're just going to have to live with it. But in any event, this is a long time coming. And
let me say the same thing to you, Rich, while we're at it, that I've been really looking forward to this for a long time. I've admired your stuff, your books, this work you do. And, we only live a few miles apart. I just drove over the hill.
Know.
So this is a real thrill for me. I'm a little nervous, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm nervous too. First of all, thank you. I can't tell you how flattering that is to hear from somebody like yourself, because of all people in my life, I don't know of anyone who's had a more profound impact on my life and on my career and how I think about what it is that I do than yourself, at least of people that I've never met before. Your work has been so tremendously influential and impactful on me personally. And, I just want to thank you for that, because I really believe that I would not have done any of the things that I've done in my life had I not come across your amazing work. Yeah. And that's just a fact. That's not, I'm not embellishing. That's not an exaggeration in any regard. I vividly remember I got out of rehab in 1998 and was really grappling with who I wanted to be and who I was and the decisions that I had made. And The Artist's Way was introduced to me, and I started working that program. And that was my first introduction to trying to connect with something deeper inside of myself. And the process of doing the morning pages really unlocked something in me. I wasn't sure what that was yet, but I knew I had this instinct that I had a creative spark inside of me, that there was something there to be mined and to be paid attention to. But I was looking for how to kind of amplify that a little bit more, or dig a little bit more deeply into what that might be, when I was introduced to The War of Art. And it was through my friend Sasha Gervasi, who's a screenwriter, who's been on this podcast a couple times. Have you ever met Sasha?
No.
He's the biggest evangelist of your work.
Now, were you working as an entertainment lawyer?
I was a lawyer at the time. And I was. Sasha's one of my better friends, and he was a big proponent of morning pages and The Artist's Way. And he's like, "You got to read this book." He always had it in his hands. He always had it next to his journal, and he was talking about it constantly. And he gave it to me. And Sasha, this was around the time where Sasha was having his first real big success as a screenwriter. He had written the screenplay for The Terminal, which Steven Spielberg directed with Tom Hanks. So it must have been maybe it was around 2000. 2002 is when The War of Art came out, right? maybe a little bit later than that. I can't remember exactly. He lent me his copy, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind. And the idea that you could put a face and place a shape on this idea of resistance and start to think about strategies and tactics for tackling it was revelatory for me. And it really just unlocked something inside of me that led me on this path and, empowered me to write Finding Ultra and to start this podcast and to do all the things that I do today. So thank you for that.
All right. You're welcome.
It's got to be, I'm not the only one who's said something like that to you. This work has been profoundly impactful on so many people, which places you squarely in the seat of, the kind of guru role. And so I'm interested in how that lands for you as somebody who's, a practitioner, a writer, and, that's your thing, right?
Yes. That's a really interesting question, Rich. It's like, I wrote The War of Art in like 2 months. It just kind of came out of me like that. And it really is something that I sort of had done verbally, maybe 20 or 30 times with friends. Friends would come to me and say, I know I've got a book in me. Can you talk to me and help me, da-da-da-da. And I'd sit up with them till 2 a.m, kind of telling them, there's this force out there, this negative force called resistance. And the first thing you're going to have to do is overcome it before you can do anything else. And I would try to psych people up, to do their thing. And of course, nobody ever did it, right?
Right.
But so I thought, let me just write this book. And then when someone comes to me like that, I'll just say, here, read this, And I never, at the time, it took a while for it to kind of catch on. And then, people started writing to me and kind of asking and putting me in the role of a mentor or something like that, which I really am not comfortable with and don't, and from time to time, people have said, you could take this on the road. You could do
this could be your whole life.
You could do this, and I said, absolutely, I do not want to. I'm a writer. I'm writing fiction. This is what I want to do and what I've been trying to do my whole life. And so that, I've always feel uncomfortable with that. To me, the best way of communicating what's in that book is through a book, and when I talk about it, I'm never quite comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to do it with you if you for your listeners.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to do that. We're definitely going to do that today. But I think what you're keying into there is the fact that a core thesis of the book is this idea of self-empowerment. Like, you have to be your own guru, right?
Yes.
You have to take agency and control over this path that you're blazing for yourself. And it's not about a guru or a teacher. And when you become the locus of all that energy, that's really antagonistic to the ideas that are set forth in the book itself.
And I'm sure you get this too, Rich. Like, when somebody puts you in the role of a guru or a mentor or somebody that are looking for advice, and I've done this myself from the other side, they're giving away their power. And when I've done it from the other side, I can feel I'm giving away my power. Why am I asking this guy or this gal what to do? What do they know about me? And one of the things that people sometimes write me long emails, talking about their addiction or whatever it is, whatever their issues are, right? And what I've finally kind of come to say to people is, sit down and get into a kind of a calm place and then read that note over yourself as if somebody else had written it to you, because almost always within these kind of, expressions of self-loathing or agony, the answer is right there. It's just leaping right out of the page, that some project that they want to do, some book they want to write or whatever it is. And of course, that's been my story too, and the reason I wrote about resistance was because it was such a force in my life and, wiped me out for so many years.
Right. So we're gonna get into that because it's pretty good. We're brought to you today by the Plant Power Meal Planner, because I think we all aspire to eat better, but most of us struggle when it comes to how to make it stick. So we created a platform that takes all the hassle and the guesswork out of optimal nutrition by giving you affordable access to thousands of customizable, delicious, easy to prepare, plant-based recipes that are constantly being updated, built in with automatic grocery delivery of everything you need, plus access to our team of amazing nutrition coaches ready to answer all your questions 7 days a week. To learn more and sign up, visit meals.richroll.com. And right now, we are offering a special deal, $10 off an annual membership when you use the promo code RRHealth for just $1.70 a week, literally the price of a cup of coffee. Again, that's meals.richroll.com. Let's define resistance kind of broadly in the context of how you came to think of it.
I call it resistance with a capital R. And like if we had a typewriter or a keyboard in front of me now, or you've got one there with a blank screen or a blank page in it, we would feel a force radiating off that page, a negative force trying to push you away from it, right? And it would take, that's what I call resistance. It would be the same thing as if we went out and bought an exercise bike or a treadmill and we brought it home to the house and and suddenly we realize we're coming up with every excuse in the world not to get on that treadmill. So resistance is this negative force of self-sabotage that will work against us anytime we try to move from a lower level to a higher level, ethically, morally, creatively. If you have an idea for a book, if you have an idea for a podcast, if you have an idea for this studio or something that you want to do, and I want to ask you about this, Rich, a voice will come into your head right immediately that will say, who are you to put this thing together? This has been done 1,000,000 times and it's been done better than you ever could do or ever would do. You're too old, you're too young, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you don't have enough education, you have too much education, et cetera, et cetera. And that negative force is universal. I can tell you from the thousands of emails I've got. And not only is it universal, but it's the same voice in all of our heads. You know, it may be tailored a little bit to you or to me, but it's the same voice. And I was never aware of that. When I first started to write as a 24-year-old, resistance just kicked my ass all over the place. And I went through a lot of stuff before I finally kind of said to myself, you know what, there's a force out there that's working against me. You know, it's not just something I'm inventing. There is a real force out there, just like gravity, just like, the transit of Venus across the sky. And once I could sort of give a name to it, then I could say, okay, now I have something I can deal with. How can I overcome this? Can I develop habits that will help me overcome it? Can I organize my day in such a way? Can I change my mindset in such a way? And so anyway, that's kind of my definition of resistance.
Well, the first step seems to be disassociating your identity from the resistance itself, because I think what we all kind of do is self-identify with that. That is part of who we are. That's a great way of putting it,
Rich. In fact, I've never heard that before. That's exactly it.
Well, you have talked about, this idea that exists outside of yourself, right? If you're just thinking, well, I can't do it, this is me telling myself this, as opposed to this external force that we can, define as this pernicious entity working at odds with our effort to climb to that, elevated place. But what was it that was like the light switch for you that allowed you to kind of come to that realization? Was it just pain?
It was pain, I guess. But, I can't actually remember. There was not like a moment when I said that, or if there was, to myself, oh, this is resistance. It just, just over time, I guess. I mean, there was a moment that sort of where things turned around in that way for me, but I don't think I identified a force as resistance. But what you just said, Rich, is exactly right. Of disassociating this concept of resistance, this fact of resistance, from your own identity. Like when we hear this voice in our head that says, you're not good enough, it's all been done, et cetera, what makes that so powerful against us is we think it's our own thoughts. We think, oh, that's me assessing the situation objectively, but it's not. It's this other siren voice, this force that's just out there, that's a fact of nature. And once we can say, oh, that's not me, that kind of is the key to the whole thing.
Right. It's so interesting. I think the other thing that happens, or I should just share my own personal experience because I don't know what other people's experiences are, but there's this sense that this is not something that other people have to deal with. There are the talented people out there, those that are touched, or those for whom, the muse seems to come easy, that are able to sidestep this issue of dealing with resistance. And when you read the book and you realize, oh, this is a universality, this is a universal thing, this is something that everybody experiences, whether you're a writer, an entrepreneur, an athlete, and also that it never goes away, which is sort of disheartening, but also comforting in the sense that, I'm not alone. Like, I tend to look at the world and think everybody, is figuring things out in a way that I'm not able to, which leads to that voice of self-defeatism and that cycle, then feeling bad about myself for feeling self-defeated, and the vicious cycle that ensues that just takes you down the shame spiral where paralysis becomes impossible to overcome.
In fact, let me ask you, Rich, you were saying before that when you read The War of Art, it had made an impact on you. What form did resistance take for you at that particular time, and what did you?
Well, when I was writing I'd never written a book before, so the idea that I could even write a book seemed daunting, to say the least. What is it that I could possibly share that hasn't been said before? I'm not an Olympic champion. I've never won a race. It's not like I'm the most amazing athlete in the world, and my story of addiction and recovery is pretty pedestrian. I would think, why am I doing this? Who could possibly be interested in this? And the more that
yet the book is fascinating and totally riveted me.
Well,
and
I appreciate
it's like a seminal book.
And I tried to, I don't know if you noticed, but I dropped in little War of Art, references, not explicitly, but this idea of, when your heart is true, the universe will conspire to support you, or the prize doesn't go to the fastest, it goes to the guy who slows down the least. Like the fairy dust that gets sprinkled on top of the discipline and the patience and the persistence and all the things that you speak about that are required to achieve something excellent. But it was really by dint of relying on the principles in the book that allowed me to disassociate from those negative voices and just continue to plow through. But I will say this, and I've said this on the podcast before. So I wrote Finding Ultra in 2012. I've done cookbooks and I have Voice and Change and all of that. And those are books, but they're not books, right?
Yes.
And I would say that the resistance has never been stronger for me in terms of writing what would be considered a follow-up to Finding Ultra or another book. And in many ways, this entire podcast venture is like the most colossal form of resistance that I've self-erected to create an excuse for not having to write another book. Right? So I've dove into this thing and it's become very successful and gratifying and I love it and it's amazing. But it's fairly all-consuming, and now it makes it easier for me to tell myself, well, I don't have time to write another book, or do I even really need to? I reach more people on this microphone every week than a book that's going to take me a year and a half to write. So why do it, right? So that resistance.
And of course, that is
another thing. Like the resistance never goes away. It basically, fills whatever vacancy that you have in your life and adapts to whatever environment you're in to prevent you from accessing that next level of higher consciousness.
So you didn't have any resistance to the podcast, to doing the podcast?
Right, because that's like a procrastination or a distraction, in certain respects. You can make that
what you
argument.
mean.
Yeah. So I should be writing
you
right
gotta
now.
Write
instead
that
of talking
book.
to you about writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the resistance takes many forms. And to this point of the tactile and the mystical, another thing that I really love about it is that what you write about is so rooted in very practical takeaways. Like, look, you got to create ritual, you got to create habits, you got to be your own self-disciplinarian. You have to have these rules, and here's how you set up your calendar and erect healthy boundaries to protect that thing that's most precious to you. But when you do those things, you provide the space for the muse to enter and for you to connect with the collective unconscious, so that you are not necessarily writing or whatever it is you're creating, but really acting as a channel for the best version of who you are to reveal itself to you.
Well,
so talk a little bit about that balance between the practical and the mystical.
Well, that's absolutely true. And this must be in ultra fitness events too. I mean, when you write about this, that it's when you get to that point of, the third day of running around Hawaii or whatever it is, your third Ironman in Hawaii, that you start, getting really deeply into yourself, right? That you enter a whole other level. But the way that you get there is through the mundane, through the training, and through one foot in front of another, and all of the discipline and the ritual that goes into that. But it is the creative process, to me, this is my experience, is that it's a two-sided thing. On the one hand, there is the practical, the blue-collar aspect of the thing. You have to show up every morning. You have to, have habits that reinforce what you're doing. You have to work every day just like a blue-collar guy with a whistle in the factory, but at the same time, once you sort of get rolling in it, and it's really like yoga, right? Where the whole concept of yoga is that you use the body to get to the spirit, right? To as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into a particular pose, things start to happen inside you. And the same thing, certainly in writing and songwriting and things like that, that once the mundane has been taken care of, the floor has been swept, the table's been cleaned, and you're actually sitting down there, hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, and you know this, Rich.
Yeah.
Pretty soon, things start to happen. Ideas start coming to you. There is a muse, there is a higher level, and your intention and your integrity and your work, your labor, your sweat to go for that higher level gets rewarded. And the higher level does come down to you. And, it's a commonplace to say that the best pages I've ever written, I don't remember writing them at all, and that's not completely true, because you are kind of there, you're doing your thing. It isn't just a magical thing, but you get there through the depth of commitment and of aspiration and of intensity. And another thing, while I'm blathering on here about this stuff,
no, I love it. Keep going.
That one of the things that I hate about this era today, the internet era, the social media era, is it's so surface. It's so superficial. It rewards absolute superficiality, right? We go from one clickbait thing to another. We never delve into anything. And if there is a secret to creativity or to, ultra fitness or anything like that, it's depth. It's the opposite. It's kind of, after hour 1 is different than after 10 minutes. And after hour 2 is different than after hour 1, and so on. If as a writer, as you start getting into a scene or something that you're working on, as you get level down, things start coming. It's not even mystical. It's just sort of like, well, gee, that guy that I had standing in the corner, that guy should come out here and say something,
Right.
And then, oh my God, that really makes it happen. Whereas you wouldn't have thought of that the first 10 minutes into the operation.
Yeah, you gotta blast out all the cobwebs and create that open space that allows for that to come in. And as a writer, that's what you live for. So the structure, the rigor that you put in, and the discipline is solely to create that open space for those glimpses to enter, right?
Exactly.
And it is true. Like, when I first read The War of Art, the culture was very different. Now, the level to which we're enticed by distraction is 1,000-fold what it was a decade ago, let alone 2 decades ago, which I think in some regard makes your work more urgent, right? If we can identify an optimistic vein in all of this, it's that we're becoming more aware of how distracted we are at the same time that we've become more powerless
yes, right,
to
right.
Defend against it.
Yeah.
But we're having conversations about that, and we're having conversations with our kids about that because we feel ourselves being pulled into our phones in a way that we realize is alarming. And it's become incumbent upon all of us to exert a lot more self-discipline around what's important to ourselves so that we can carve that out. And for most, and I found myself in this place, it's a losing battle. You're competing with computer engineers who've studied psychology and know exactly what to dangle in front of you to keep you on that lower plane and prevent you from ascending to your potential.
I've always said, if resistance is a real force, and it is, and it's out there, I always have said, if you wanted to make $1 billion, invent something that lets people yield to their resistance.
Uh-huh.
And the internet and social media, that's it. They invented it. That's, everything that we want, that the distraction that's put in front of us, the clickbait that's put in front of us, feeds into this existing force that's there already, that wants to distract us from our own, whatever our own calling is,
right
inside here. And so I don't think there's any real way around it other than to sort of block it out somehow, just turn it off, go away from it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can dally in that world and defeat it. It's too powerful.
Right. Right. But you're on social media and you've got this website that's pretty robust and educational and it's got tons of content. And you did this video series on the warrior ethos that's up there. So, you're participating, but I suspect that you have pretty good rules around when you engage.
That's true, but I'm also a little bit like what you were saying about the podcast. That stuff is a little easier to do, and I actually need to crack the whip over myself. I've got a book that's waiting to go, and that I'm kind of avoiding at the moment too.
Yeah. Another one that you're working on right now.
Yeah, another one I'm working on now. Yeah.
Well, I've heard you talk about this as well. Something that's unique to the culture at the moment that is new and different from our predecessors is this idea that everybody has to now kind of think of themselves as a brand. Right? We're all like, what is my avatar and what do I represent, on the internet and how am I communicating with other people? And beneath that, I suppose, is this idea of individualism, right? As opposed to collectivism.
Yeah.
The great generation, they weren't thinking about themselves as brands or what their individual identity was. They got on a career track and they held that job for, their entire professional career. Whereas now we're switching between careers all the time. And it's really about what's in my best interest. And there's a lot of not so great things about that. But one thing I think, and I've heard you speak about this, that is interesting and somewhat optimistic is that it does sort of compel you to ask these questions about who you are. Like you're having this dialogue with the internal voice about what it is that you're here to do, what it is that you're here to express.
Yeah, the whole concept now of everybody having to be a brand and what is my I don't know exactly where that goes, But as you say, it's a little bit like the Maslow pyramid, where at the bottom you're just dealing with your basic needs of food, shelter, whatever, and by the time you get to the tippy top, you're into self-realization and the concept of who am I, why am I here, that kind of thing. And we're lucky enough now in this world of as bad as things are, at least, we don't have to go out and kill what we need to eat, Right. And a lot of us are at the top or near the top of that pyramid or have the time to do that. And we start asking these questions of, which is what the War of Art's all about, is really, who am I? What is my gift? The actor's question, the Stannis, who am I? Why am I here? What do I want? And in a way, what's the point of human life if we don't ask that question? What is your particular gift? What is mine? What are your kids' gift? Whatever. But I'm not sure where it goes in this world of hyper. Can everybody be a brand? Can everybody, have some, be trying to buy other people's books or movies? I don't know. But, I I was just talking about this yesterday, the concept of, to go to the ancient world a little, in Pericles' funeral oration back in ancient Athens, where he talks about the idea of a citizen. And that he says that I declare of our citizens of Athens that they are the, how do you say it? The rightful lord and owner of their own person, of his own person. And as opposed to being a serf or a slave or somebody that's in a mass movement or is in a cult or is, being, somebody else is guiding them. And I think that it is incumbent upon all of us to get to that point where we are the rightful lord and owner of our own person. And at that point, the next question is, how do we do that in a community for the good of the whole planet and for future generations, and not just our own brand and what we can sell, how many T-shirts we could sell, whatever, So it's certainly not good to be blind to that, to be unaware of that. But we're sort of at a point now where we're at that tippy top of the pyramid, where we're maybe more obsessed with that than is healthy.
And at what cost? No longer are we, facing a death sentence for laying down our shield. We have lost that connection with the collective well-being, right? It's all about like what I need and what I want. We see this being played out with the wars over, wearing masks and not wearing masks. And I fear for the cohesion of the the greater comedy when that's the only question being asked.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's good in the sense that we're, like you say, we're having to deal with it. We're becoming aware of it now, where we weren't aware of it before. I mean, I do think in America, if you could ask the average bear, they do want to come together. I think people do want this country to be unified one way or another, or at least to think of each other not as the devil or the enemy. But we just are not sure how. We're so polarized and tribalized at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, that brings up, I was going to get to this later, but it seems like a good time to talk about it now. As somebody who is so well-versed and steeped in all of these ancient cultures, the warrior cultures, somebody who has written lots of military novels. How do you take all of that tremendous research that you've done over the years that has seeped into all of your books? How does that impact how you think about where we're at right now, culturally and politically?
Well, that's a tough one. We've certainly see a lot of people now who, it seems to me, have abandoned the idea of honor or integrity. And I'm not sure how that happened, but if we think back, like my dad was in World War II, that was the greatest generation, and there definitely was a concept that a man acts in a certain way, and a woman too, right? That there's certain levels that you won't allow yourself to sink to. You just won't go those places. But somehow in this culture today, we're plumbing new depths of these things, new depths. Shame is a great thing that the ancient Spartans were a shame-based culture. And the Japanese, the samurai, is a shame-based culture where there were certain things that you just would not do. You would not go, you die before that would happen, right? If you were, a samurai, you would kill yourself before you would do that. And I don't know, maybe you have an answer to this, Rich. I don't know what happened to the idea of shame and where people are now so shameless that nothing is beneath them. I mean, we had a president that was plumbing new depths of shamelessness every day, and it seemed to be like his superpower in some way. And I don't know. What do you think about that, Richard?
Yeah,
what
happened? I don't know that I have any great insight into that, but I think shame has been trumped by the drive for attention, and what drives attention is drama and strife and pettiness and all of these sorts of things, right? That come at the cost of comporting yourself in a more virtuous manner.
Yeah, I guess if you're willing to put a sex tape on Instagram or wherever they put it, that maybe you'll start getting attention. Not you and me, but certain people out there.
Right.
So I guess that's a big part of it. That if you discard shame, you can get more attention by just acting in more of a shameless way, doing things that nobody ever did before. And people will look at that, oh my God, look at how they did that.
Right. But when I see that, what I think is that person is blind to living an examined life, right? Which is really at the core of what your work is. I mean, you say there is a war afoot. That war is between you, and you're the enemy, right? Like the only war that exists is the war between you, and it's your job to raise your sword and go to battle with yourself for the purpose of reaching that higher state of consciousness or elevating yourself and connecting with the more authentic, true self within, so that you can bring expression to what it is that makes you uniquely you, and share those gifts with the world. So talk a little bit about that war with the self.
It's the war of art for me. That's why the title of the book. And I believe that we're all born with a destiny. We're all born with an identity, like Wordsworth's poem, not trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our. We come into this life with an already established identity. Whether now I'm a believer in previous lives, but we won't go down that rabbit hole today. But
we
in
can
any
go
event,
down it. But go ahead.
I do think that if you have kids from day one is different from another, right? They've got an identity and it's there, right? Even kittens and puppies are that way, right? So we have this identity, but then that is kind of crying out like an acorn to become an oak, right? And we have this identity, but we don't know what it is. It's sort of a trick that life plays on us, right? We come in and we don't know who we are. And adolescence is like the excruciating moment of not knowing what we are, right? And then again, there is this force of resistance that when we try to ask that question of ourselves, who am I? What do I love? What is my gift? This force of resistance will try to stop us from examining it. It'll try to distract us. It'll try to push us off into shadow careers or shadow activities or something that's not in that way. And so this is the war that we're fighting, is against that negative force to find out who we are and what our gift is. I mean, I always say that, I think I've written like 20 books now, which is kind of amazing to me since my first book came out when I was 55, right?
That's so crazy.
It's absolutely true that before I wrote any one of those books, I had no clue that I was going to write that book. It wasn't like I was sitting, I've got this whole magazine of books, like bullets in a magazine waiting to go. I had no idea at all. So the point of that is that we find out who we are by the works that we produce. And but yet those works as they come along are mysteries to us. We don't know, where is it coming from? I never would have thought, if you would look at, the list at the front of a book of mine of this title, that title, the other title, never would have thought, that's coming next, or it's a mystery to me. So again, that is sort of the war of going forward into the unknown and kind of following the muse, following whatever goddess, whatever is coming from another dimension. Right. That song that's playing in your head when you're on the freeway that nobody else has heard. That's the war. Going and fighting that, and you're fighting it against your own self, against your own self-sabotage that's trying to stop you. So that is, to me, that's kind of the coming into who you were already. You already were that, but you just didn't know it. And through these actions, you realize it and you go, wow, I had no idea I was going to have a podcast. I had no idea I was going to be talking to 587 people and writing, Finding Ultra and Finding Ultra Part 2, I had no, or
We'll
whatever
see.
else is out there.
Right, but it's in the doing, right? The waging of the war is action based, right?
Yes.
Whereas I think a lot of people are maybe they're pursuing some self-inquiry, but it's an intellectual exercise, and they're sort of awaiting the epiphany, the sort of descending idea of who they are before they actually do anything. And by your description and the books that you've written, it's the process that reveals, right? You have to engage with that process and wrestle with it, and it is in that you have these discoveries.
Exactly. And I think for me, I can tell you that I spent many years in that world inside my head, wasting my time. It's like therapy. It's like going there, but until you actually once you start to act, like I'm sure it's the same in ultra fitness or anything like that, once you actually start, then you start to discover things.
Right. The path unfolds in front of you.
It does.
Slowly. Not
not easily.
Yeah. The idea being that what paralyzes many is they want to see what that path looks like, or at least, be able to forecast pretty far down the line before they take the first step. And it just doesn't work that way. You have to take those steps not knowing and trust that the brick will get laid right, one step in front of you as you go.
Yeah. And it is scary. I mean, it is the unknown that we're going into, and it's scary. There's no doubt about it.
Right. And part of that war is the battle between that instinct, that seed that I think does live within all of us that's telling us there's something that you're here to do. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like this little faint voice in the back of your mind. And then the increasing self-loathing or toxicity that creeps up the more that you ignore that voice.
Yes.
Right?
Until it becomes more painful to not do it.
Right. Until those things cross, and you really have what I think is akin to, somebody who's hit their bottom with drugs and alcohol.
I think it's exactly
the pain of the status quo exceeds the fear of that unknown path ahead.
Yes, I think it's exactly that. Yeah. And I do think that we have to kind of hit bottom in some sense before we start on any kind of upward course, because resistance is so diabolical, and it puts us in denial of whatever it is. Like this particular book that I'm working on right now, that I'm starting on now, I had the exact same thing that you were talking about Finding Ultra 2, whatever it is, or even Finding Ultra, where I say to myself, who's going to care about this thing? This is the dumbest idea. You've established a certain, reputation. You're going to destroy that reputation if you write this thing. It's so dumb. Nobody's going to possibly, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that I sort of have to hit some kind of bottom where I say, look, I just can't stand this shit anymore. I can't stand hearing this yammering in my head. I just got to do this damn thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's funny. I'm laughing because you're the guy who has all the self-awareness around this, and yet you're still.
But it's true for everybody, right? Everybody,
right?
Everybody does it,
Well, let's go back. You've led such an interesting, colorful life. I mean, did you, as a young person, did you always know that you wanted to be a writer? I mean, you have this period of your life of essentially being like this blue-collar journeyman with all these different crazy jobs.
Yeah, no, I never, as a young person, never. And sort of the gist of the start of that thing, I think you may have heard the story before, but I was working as a copywriter at an ad agency in New York. And I had a boss named Ed Hannibal who quit and wrote a novel, and the novel was a hit. Overnight, he was like a success, and he quit and went off. And I thought to myself, well, shit, why don't I do that? No problem, So that was the first time that I thought of, I could write, or that aspiration.
It seemed possible.
Seemed possible to me, or never did even cross my mind before.
And did you immediately go home and start writing, or how did that begin to play out in your life?
Pretty much, I did quit my job, and I was married. I was living in New York City, and I kind of set out to write this thing. And I had no business whatsoever. I had no clue what writing was, no idea what resistance was, no concept of any of the things, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and I worked on it for about 2 years, got this close to the end, and resistance with a capital R, I just blew up my life. I couldn't face that last 1 yard to get across the goal line, and just acted out,
Right.
you know, in ways that we don't need to talk about. But that sort of blew that whole thing up. And that kind of set me out on this kind of odyssey of traveling around the country and working these, you know, these
Mm.
crazy jobs that I worked.
Right. So you blow up your marriage, you blow up the book in this colossal act of self-sabotage and really fear, right? Was it fear?
Absolutely.
Fear
Terror.
fear of success, fear of failure. Like these are
Both.
all like kind of close cousins of, they're subsets of resistance. There's resistance. Self-sabotage is an aspect of that, but why does self-sabotage become so prominent? And what is the fear that you think drives that?
I
At
mean,
least
I
for
think
yourself.
it's like I said, it's the fear of going from a lower level to a higher level. Fear of success, in other words. If I had finished that book, no matter how bad it was, I would have gone to a higher level. I would have been a guy who at least wrote a book, you know, at age 24 or whatever I was at that time. And of course, I was completely unconscious of all this, no clue what was going on.
Right.
All I knew was I was in a state of terror and I had to kind of get out of it one way or another.
Uh-huh.
If I had been an alcoholic, I would have, you know, just drunk and wound up in the ditch somewhere. You know?
Right. So you implode your whole life because that's safer than what might happen if you actually finish the book. And I think that speaks to just how powerful the resistance is, right?
Yes.
And what an unconscious driver it can be. So then you go off, you know, across America holding all these, you worked in a mental institution, worked on a farm, you did all kinds of stuff, right? And writing along the way, or what was the relationship to writing during that period of time?
No, I mean, it was really a state of running away from it.
Mm.
So I lived in my van. I had a 65 Chevy van that I went back and forth across the country 13 times in.
Uh-huh.
And I always had my typewriter with me, but I never touched it. It was like under, you know, I don't know what, a shirt. It was wrapped in something or other. But I was just absolutely running away from that. But I didn't know it. You know, if you had asked me, I wouldn't have said it. I'd have come up with some excuse, some bogus rationalization. But on some deep level, I knew that, you know, I sort of said to myself, this was a terrible mistake I made trying to write in the first place. I never should have done it. It was really stupid. But on some other level, I knew this is what I got to come back to this somehow. I got to slay this dragon somehow, or it's going to kill me.
Right. Well, otherwise you would have just gone back and worked at the ad agency, right?
Yeah.
Why did you just, you know, light off onto the terrain, you know, in this sort of Mark Twain kind of way?
Well, we're getting into some deep stuff here, Rich. But what happened was, maybe you can relate to this from your own experiences. I remember I had an interview. I did try to go back to an ad agency. I had an interview with a guy that I had worked with before who would become a boss, blah, blah, blah. And when I went into that interview, I must have stunk with such loserdom or whatever it was that I was like toxic, and I could see in people's eyes that they saw this on me, and it was like, get this guy out of here, you know, whatever it is. And I had a couple of more things like that. Didn't take many to do that. And I just realized somehow I had fallen out of the bottom of the middle class. You know how if you've been to college and you can speak with polysyllabic words, you will go into a room and people go, oh, this is one of us, et cetera. For whatever reason, I had kind of fallen through the bottom of it. And the reason that I worked a bunch of blue-collar jobs was not like it was any plan of mine. It was like those were the only jobs I could get, you know?
Interesting.
And so yeah, I just kind of fell through the floor. The floor opened up and I went through the trap door.
Went through the bottom.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of going from gig to gig, got the typewriter, refused to get rid of it, even though you're not using it. So walk me up to the point where the pain of this reality that you were experiencing just became too much, and you kind of have this tipping point?
Actually, I write about this in The War of Art, but I'll tell you one other little story before we get to that. After, I don't know how many years it was, it was only maybe 3 or 4 years. It wasn't like an endless amount of time of going around the country. I finally, I just kind of gave up on that whole life. I know I'm going on here.
No, go.
One of the concepts I had in my mind came from Jack Kerouac's book, On the Road. And from this was kind of the 60s and the early 70s. And I felt like if I could get myself to this mystical place, I could be someone that could walk in anywhere, to any situation. I could relate to it. I could find work. I could make friends, If I could just get to that place instead of being so stuck in my own head and so afraid and all that sort of stuff. And that was kind of my ideal. And at some point, I was actually in San Francisco, and I was down to getting a job as a driving instructor. And for me, that was like the lowest, because, I had driven trucks. I had done somehow driving was my thing for whatever it was. And I just gave up. I said, I can't do this. I'm not Jack Kerouac. I can't live this life on the road. I give up. I'm going home. I'm going back to New York. I'm going to take the shittiest job I can find, and I'm going to try to little by little kind of work my way back into the middle class, however I could. And I was driving across the country, back to New York, taking the southern route, and I met this couple, a cowboy and his wife, who had just gotten married, and they had all their possessions in a paper bag between them. And the short version of the story was, we kind of became friends over a couple of days, and he said, I'm going to be work on my uncle's ranch. Why don't you come with me? And I said, I can't ride a horse. I don't know anything about that. I'll teach you, no problem. And I thought to myself, a cowboy. I've never been a cowboy. Maybe I should. And I just said to myself, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I've just got to go. I've got to go home. So I did go home. And to keep blathering along here, Rich, there's a chapter in The War of Art where I talk about this. I got back to New York. I got a job driving a cab, and I was in a job tending bar, and I had a little sublet apartment. And one night I was just sitting there, and I went into that sort of what I imagine an alcoholic goes into when they really need a drink. And I thought, who could I call? Are there any women I could call and I could kind of go over to their place? Or is there somebody I could, and I said to myself, I just can't do this anymore. And I pulled out that typewriter. And like I say, this is in The War of Art. And I sat down for like 2 hours just typing some story. I don't know what it was. Whatever it was, I threw it away. It was terrible, right? And I went in to wash. There were some dishes in the sink. And as I started washing the dishes, I realized that I was whistling. And I sort of had this sense that, like, I was okay. And I thought, I can sit down at the typewriter. I'm like a million miles from doing anything good, but finally I can actually sit and try. And like this great weight went off my shoulders at that point. And I thought, it may take me another 30 years, which it did, to do anything decent, but at least I can do it now. And I don't know why I could when I couldn't before. Maybe just because I'd tried everything else under the sun.
Right.
And I just knew I couldn't try that anymore.
Right. What was your self-awareness around that moment at the time?
Nothing more than what I just told you. Right. I just felt like I now can sit at a typewriter and try to work. And I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to fall off the end of the earth. I'm not going to go insane. I'm going to be okay.
Right. To extend the alcoholic analogy, I mean, there's so many similarities. It's sort of like the alcoholic trying everything before finally just giving up and raising their hand and saying, I need help, right? I'm going to drink only after 5 o'clock. I'm only going to drink beer. You have to do all of that and exhaust all of it before you're so depleted and ready for something new, like that change. And in your situation, taking all of these different jobs, it would be one thing if you were a truck driver, a cowboy, whatever, if that was part of the plan of collecting amazing experiences to write about, but that wasn't what you were doing. These were just, you were running away from your life, essentially. Yeah. Now you must look back and think, oh, I've got all these rich experiences that I can tap into.
I do think those experiences were important, even though I haven't actually ever tapped into those specific ones. But if I look, I'm a believer in the muse. I believe there's a goddess up there. And if I think of the muse like watching over me at this time,
right,
she would say, oh, look at him go down this blind alley.
right.
Look at him go down that blind alley. And then finally, when I come back and I sit down at the typewriter, I think she finally perks up and goes, the son of a bitch is finally sitting down and doing what I've been waiting for him to do for all this time, and now from the goddess's point of view, she would say, okay, I'm going to give him something. I'm going to give him an idea. I've been holding back. Now I'm going to help him a little bit.
Right. I mean, there is a divinity in being that broken, and
definitely,
and something to be revered about hitting bottom. And it's something I think about a lot because I'm involved in the recovery community. It's like, do you step in and try to divert somebody from meeting that kind of predicament, or is that exactly what they need? I mean, I know in my own case, I've had a couple bottoms and they were transformational, and I look back on them with great gratitude. There was so much pain that I don't want to ever experience that again, but they were the catalyst for the greatest growth experiences that I've ever had. So there is something to be said for standing back and being the observer as opposed
and letting
to the
somebody
intervener.
hit bottom.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I really loved about Finding Ultra, that really came through. That was absolutely, so I said, that's for real. That's the real thing.
Yeah, I still wish it hadn't happened. but yeah, I mean, you can't shortcut somebody's growth trajectory. And that applies to the pursuit, of art and creativity as well, right? Like something that I really appreciate about what you talk about and write about is the fact that there is no hack here, right? Like we're in this culture where everybody's looking for the shortcut and how can I, eradicate all the pain and just get right to the good stuff. And it just doesn't work that way. And rather than fighting that, just embrace that, because that's part of the toil and the joy that contributes to what it is that you're trying to express.
It's hard. It's so hard to do, though, to keep doing that stuff. But I remember one moment I was working in the oil fields in Louisiana, and I had this friend that, we lived in this little bunkhouse together, and his brother, he had an older brother who had also gone through one of these odysseys, right? And he was telling me that my friend was telling me one day that his brother had finally gotten out of it. He got married, everything was good. And I said, well, how old is he now? And I forgot what the age it was, but it was like 18 years old beyond what our age. And I said, oh shit, you mean we got to go through this for another 18 years? But, I mean, as an entertainment lawyer and being in the movie business and knowing all that, about the all is lost moment, which is like in any story, you always got to sort of take your character, the protagonist,
you got to get to the bottom of the second
where they
act.
hit bottom, right? Yeah. And at that point, then they can start to come up. And it's a cliche of movies and of stories, but it's life. It's real life.
Right. The hero's journey.
Yeah.
That archetype is so powerful. It obviously is, front and center in everything that you do and think about. But what is it like that? Why does that blueprint resonate so deeply in such in an unconscious way? Like we understand it, we gravitate towards it, we know it works in terms of storytelling, whether you're writing a novel or a screenplay or a short story. But it's interesting to try to ponder, from whence does that come? Like, is it just bred into our DNA as, we evolved, over the millennia?
That's what I think. I think it is. I think over the millennia, from hominids to, cavemen and tribal things, that life just sort of works in a certain way, right? And I do think it's software that we're born with, that model, the hero's journey, is encoded in in our DNA, like along with the archetypes. And it exerts an irresistible impulse on us, I think, to live it out in one form or another, I think we all have to have a hero's journey or many hero's journeys, one after another. And I think a lot of maybe is going wrong today in this country is people aren't living out their hero's journey because they don't have to. It's not life is it's easy enough now.
Right.
People can get by that they don't have to do that. And also, obviously, the force of resistance is trying to stop them from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would there's Walker Percy is a great kind of writing hero of mine, and he wrote a book. Blanking on the name of it now, but in the book, it's not the moviegoer. The character is a doctor, and he has a couple who come to him, and they're a married couple, and they're having struggles, and they live like 14 miles away on the other side of a swamp. And he says, tonight when you leave here, go home through the swamp. Don't drive home.
Uh-huh.
Leave your car here, And he sort of compels them onto a hero's journey, a little mini hero's journey through the swamp. And of course, they get home and they have the greatest sex they ever had, Right. But there's something to that it's easier for us these days to kind of go around the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't even have a kind of an aspiration or an ethic to go through the swamp.
Right.
It's not like you should do that. That you should avoid that.
Right, of course. All the kind of cultural machinations point us towards aspiring to a life of comfort, ease, and luxury. And, to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if your needs are essentially met, then it's just too simple to go to your job and to lease the car and get the takeout food and watch Netflix and never step outside of that and challenge yourself. And I think too many people, to echo Thoreau, end up leading these lives of quiet desperation because they're not consciously engaging with that thing that I do believe is inside all of us that's yearning to be expressed.
Well, let me ask you this, Rich. Isn't kind of ultra endurance sports, isn't that sort of about that? Where you don't have to do that. You deliberately choose this adversity, this real extreme adversity, and you deliberately choose to put yourself through that. Isn't that kind of what it's about? It's kind of a hero's journey.
Because we're not living Telemann's life, right? We are in this situation where you have to craft that for yourself.
Yeah,
that's why
artificially.
You see Spartan races and Ironmans and all of these things, because there is something deeply embedded inside of us that seeks out that challenge that is not presenting itself in our life because our lives are too easy. And I just, I don't know that when I first got involved in ultra endurance, I had conscious self-awareness around that, but something was driving me in that direction. And I write about this in Finding Ultra. I mean, it was really a spiritual journey, not a physical. Everyone's, the physicality of it, or it was a mental challenge, but it was really a spiritual challenge. And when I think of your work, I think of Bagger Vance, and I think of the Bhagavad Gita, and I think of Krishna and Arjuna and that relationship, and Bagger's relationship, and in the book, and how the caddy is trying to get the master to connect with that deepest part of who he is, and that comes about only through the crucible of challenge and the stripping away of all the artifice that stands in between you and who you really are. And in my context, it wasn't golf, it was ultra endurance, which is a different, I didn't have a bagger, telling me what to do, but the sheer process of undergoing such a difficult physical journey was my means of stripping away all of that so I could communicate with a different part of who I was.
And it worked.
It worked.
It was transformational.
It was work. And like I said, I didn't consciously know that I was doing that at the time, in the same way that you weren't sure what you were doing when you finally sat down at the typewriter and banged out a few pages.
Yeah, I would say that the hero's journey, encoded in your DNA, demanded to be lived out. At least I'm sure you'd had many others before that, but in this particular case, you were sort of drawn to ultra endurance, and maybe you didn't know why. Just like I've been drawn to things, and I don't know why. Mm-hmm. But it's that. I think it's that imperative that's inside us, that instinct. Why does a salmon swim upstream, or why do birds migrate across whatever it is? I think it was something like that. It was really the best part of you, the best part of your soul, I think, calling to you and saving your life, and leading you on this transformational journey that worked, that actually created change.
It did work, but it was catalyzed by a bottom and a tremendous amount of pain, right? And short of somebody, meeting their version of that for themselves, they're otherwise faced with this choice of living life out in this matrix-esque, pre-programmed way, or choosing to bring adversity in their lives. And that's difficult to do if you're not in pain.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Right.
So when somebody comes to you and says, I know I'm just not quite as fulfilled as I'd like to be, but they haven't really sunk to any kind of, traumatic depths, making that leap is more difficult than the person who's really, up against it.
Yeah, I think it's impossible, to make that leap.
You think it is impossible? It's like the choice is always there. That choice is available. It is possible, but for some reason, we're just not going to grab at it.
Until the pain reaches, unendurable levels.
Why does it have to be that way?
I don't know. Why is it?
The world would be better if everybody could, grab onto that rope a little bit sooner, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This plays into the warrior ethos. So how do these two things cohere for you? Like the artist's life, the pursuit of creativity, the grappling with the resistance, the walking through the difficult things. How does that match up with how you think about, the warrior path and how that plays out in your novels? And you recently did this series on your website and on YouTube of talking about this.
Well, when my second book was Gates of Fire, which is about the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, not the book that the movie 300 came from.
A better version of that, which is taught at Annapolis.
Yeah, it's taught at various
West Point and places like that, right?
Because it's an expression of the warrior ethos. But when that book like I said to you before, Rich, I had no idea that book was coming, no idea that I wanted to write it. It just sort of appeared, and I was seized by it and had to do it. And I found myself writing the next 4 books were really sort of warrior books, about Alexander the Great, about the Amazons, about, various other things. And it was various other warrior cultures. And it was a surprise to me. It's like I say to myself, well, why am I writing about this? It's not like, I'm not a Navy SEAL. Why did I write about this? And I think that it's the inner war, the writer's war, the artist's war that we were talking about, that in a way, to face the blank page, to write a book, to write a movie, to write whatever it is, or ultra endurance, things like that, you have to be a warrior. One way or another, you've got to take the warrior virtues, which I would name as courage, patience, camaraderie, love for one's brothers and sisters, selflessness, and very important, the willing embracing of adversity. And there are a lot of other virtues, but those virtues that a warrior, a Spartan warrior or Alexander the Great would use for enemies out there, the artist or the endurance athlete uses those virtues to get against the enemies in here, right? When you're on your 4th Ironman in a row and every fiber of your being is screaming out, stop, this is insane, you're having to call upon something, right? And I think it's that sort of, that warrior mentality, the same thing that the Spartans called on when the day 3 at Thermopylae, whatever. So I guess, again, I was sort of drawn to write these books, and I didn't even know why, but I think I was kind of reinforcing for myself, in a way, that kind of code of honor, that sense of shame, and that ability to kind of endure and to keep going forward into the unknown.
Yeah, the idea of being regimented, of having a core code of ethics to which you organize your life is what's required to express yourself as an artist, which I think is anathema for somebody who's unfamiliar, because they think, oh, artists are they're free thinking and they just they just create and it's all, very flowery.
Yeah.
Whereas you've imposed almost a military, discipline and structure upon this process to demystify it so that you can allow for the mystical to enter.
Yeah.
And how that plays into what it means to be a warrior. It's like the warrior's obstacles are external, the artist's obstacles are internal. But the warrior on the battlefield has to have mastery over that sense of self, that like interconnectedness in order to combat those external forces of resistance.
Yes.
Is that how you
The other thing is that I think in a military context, usually that discipline or that mastery is imposed from without, right? You've got sergeants or lieutenants or whatever that are teaching you, and you're in a structure that is shaming you and making you, go forward, right? From outside, externally. Whereas, and I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of guys and gals who leave the military have a hard time, is when you make the switch to being an artist or an entrepreneur or a fitness athlete, that now becomes self-discipline.
Right. Nobody's giving you the orders.
Reinforcement, self-validation, and that's a big, hard change to make. Mm-hmm. That's a whole other dimension of reality.
Right. You're not accountable to the lieutenant or the general or whoever, but only to yourself.
The other thing, and I'm sure this is true in endurance sports too, is there's an element of drudgery in this, right? And being able to embrace the drudgery, to train, you got to go out on the trail, you got another day, I got to get up, right?
Right.
Same thing in writing or any creative enterprise. There are times when it's just a slog,
Right.
But again, that's a kind of a warrior virtue too. The warrior learns to, the soldier learns to just keep shoveling, keep digging the ditch, It's no fun, there's no glamour, but
whistling
that's what
on
it
the
is.
chain gang.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how anything is created, right? Is it not?
Yes.
I mean, you have to show up day in and day out, and most days aren't so great. And every once in a while, you get that spark, and it's awesome, and you live for that. But really, it is about falling in love with the process. It's not about the accolades or the destination or the end point or the goal or crossing any finish line. It is truly just about the showing up.
Now, did you always feel that way, Rich, or was that something that you learned when you were doing, all of those Ironmans and stuff? Did you have that attitude, or was that something that evolved through the?
No, I mean, I didn't get into it to like beat people or win races. Uh-huh. I did have enough self-awareness around it to know that I was getting into it as a process of self-discovery. Uh-huh. I'm competitive with myself, not with anyone else, uh-huh. But I learned, I love the suffering and the mental and physical, challenge of the whole thing. And I learned that as a young person, as a swimmer. So I had that kind of language for myself before I got into ultra endurance, and understood deeply that it's about process and the slog. Like that's how I got to where I got as a swimmer. That's how I achieved academic, like anything good that I've ever done has been about that. So that wasn't a lesson that needed to be taught to me. I've always gotten that. And that's how I've approached the podcast and everything else that I've done. Like I'm good at grinding. Like if I have a talent, it's not athletic. It's just, I'm willing to suffer and work harder than the next guy and put in the grind when no one's looking. And I think that's the secret sauce. And I've said this many times before, but most people really wildly overestimate what they can do in a year or so, and overestimate what they can do in a year and wildly underestimate what they can do in a decade. And as somebody who didn't publish their first book until they were in their 50s and now has 20 books, you're a living testament to that sentiment.
Yeah, I'm with you, Rich. I'm a grinder. Right. I feel like if that's a talent, if I have any talent, it's that. But I am willing to get at the grindstone and just keep hammering.
When I think of a younger version of you, I think of Ryan Holiday, who actually introduced us. Thank you for Ryan.
Yes.
Ryan for making the introduction. But that's a guy who shows up for the page every day. He's very clear that this is what he's here to do. He's here to write books, and he doesn't get caught up in all the stuff that swirls around it. Like as soon as a book's done, he's on to the next book, and the guy's cranking out a book a year. And I see the same discipline and approach to craft that you have.
Yeah, I'm amazed that Ryan does that at such a young age.
It's unbelievable.
Really, how did he do that?
I don't know. I don't know the level of and it's discipline. He has a structure and a system, and he's transparent about it. He's like, I get these cards and I have these, and this is how I do it. And then when it's done, I put it in this box. And I think there's something magical and important, and you talk about this in the War of Art, about ritual and respect for ritual. Like those little things that seemingly don't mean anything actually might be the most important things.
Definitely. I'm definitely a believer in that, in habits. I say that an amateur has amateur habits and a pro has professional habits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all the difference in the world. Did you ever see that documentary, History of the Eagles, about the band, the Eagles?
No,
Well, I'm going to tell you a little story from that. This is Glenn Frey was telling this story, that when he was like a young guy just starting out, he roomed with J.D. Souther, who was another, they were like together, and they had an apartment right above Jackson Browne's apartment. And this is before any of them had any success at all. And he could hear from his apartment above Jackson Browne's, he would hear Jackson Browne going through the piano, playing the piano. And he would play like he was working on a song.
Mm-hmm.
And he would play it one time, play it again, and he would stop occasionally to make tea, and he had like a whistling tea, Jackson Browne would. And this was a kind of a punctuation point for Glenn Frey listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
There he goes to make another pot of tea, and then he would go back and play that same thing again, and just 20 times, 30 times. And what Glenn Frey said was, I learned that's how you write a song. It doesn't just come out of the air.
Right.
Jackson Browne worked it over and over until he had it exactly the way he wanted. And that it was a grind.
Yeah.
It was, the daily one step in front of another. And I just thought that was a great story. So true.
He wasn't struck by lightning and this perfect song just
maybe he was struck by lightning
when
he first got the flash of what that melody was, but then it took forever to get it down exactly the way he wanted it.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that transition between amateur or dilettante and turning pro, right? Which is the great follow-up to the War of Art. Like this difference it's really a mindset shift, right? Like, am I doing this as a side thing, or is this who I am? And if so, what is my relationship to the work I want to create?
I mean, for me, having defined resistance as this negative force, then the next question becomes, well, how do you get around it? How do you overcome it? And for me, it was the idea of turning pro, by which I mean that not that you only will work for money from now on, because usually if you're an artist or a writer or whatever, nobody's giving you any money anyway, right? But it's the concept of thinking, if I'm an amateur and I run into adversity, I'm going to fold, right? Because I'm not really in it. I'm just doing it for fun, right? Or if I'm not in the mood, I'm not going to work today.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I've got problems, with the family or whatever, money, I'm going to blow off today's work or today's workout or whatever. But a professional, if you think about Kobe Bryant, you think about Tom Brady, you think about Michael Jordan, I mean, a professional shows up every day, does his work every day, plays hurt, doesn't let anything stop him. And not that a professional doesn't take a day off every now and then, but a professional loves it so much that they are willing to commit wholeheartedly to it and to give themselves totally over to whatever their aspiration is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the relationship to those obstacles that's different, right? The obstacle is the way, or the obstacle becomes the way, as opposed to the impediment that's going to get you to quit.
Right.
And that's the big difference.
And again, it's what you were talking about, process. It's a practice. It's a today, tomorrow, the next day, what we can do in a year, what we can do in 10 years. It's not just getting to some particular imagined goal. Oh, I'm going to win the Oscar and my life is going to change. It's a lifetime commitment, things that we're talking about.
And I think what you did brilliantly is also give the reverence to these creative pursuits that they deserve in terms of what's required to do them well, right? We all understand that if you're Tom Brady or you're Michael Jordan, like you're showing up no matter what, you're putting in crazy amounts of work, like your level of dedication is insane. But for some reason, we don't think about writing or stand-up comedy or even entrepreneur, like all these other endeavors don't demand that same level of respect. We all think, well, you saw it, your boss wrote a book. Well, how hard can it be? I'm going to write a book. Or you see a guy get up on stage and tell a joke, you think it's easy. And so we don't have the respect for the craft that we would for, what a great athlete does.
Yeah. I mean, everybody thinks they can write. Everybody thinks they can tell a joke, but nobody thinks that they could be a brain surgeon or they could be a concert pianist. They get that, but they don't get the other thing. And of course, I was that way at the start too. Like I say, I thought, how hard could this be? It's hard.
Well, you had to live it out so that you could write the book and tell all of us, so we could save a little bit of time, right? How does the resistance show up for you now? Well, you shared that one example, but with your level of self-awareness, you must be able to see it coming, a mile away compared to most people, and yet it still rises.
It's still so diabolical. Resistance is so diabolical and so nuanced that. Like I was saying before, this one book that I'm working on, I'm hearing that voice in my head, what your writing's really dumb, nobody's going to care, da, 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 da. But I do have a rule that I have learned and that I believe, and that is that the stronger the resistance that you feel, the more important it is that you do that, whatever it is you
talk a little
resisting.
bit about that more, because that's really powerful.
Another mantra that I say is that resistance comes second. Now, if we imagine that we were if this is our dream, our novel, or our startup, or whatever it is, and we set it out in the sunshine on a field or a flat thing like this, immediately a shadow is going to fall from this thing. This is the dream, and resistance is the shadow. So the shadow is exactly proportionate to the dream, so that if it's a big dream, it's going to be a big shadow. So in other words, if you're feeling, and I say this to myself as I'm talking about this thing, the more resistance I feel to something, the more certain I can be that there's a big dream there and that I've got to do it. If it's a little dream, you don't have any resistance at all, So in other words, when you're feeling that horrible resistance, it's a good sign.
Right.
It shows there's something there.
But it makes it all the harder, right? The bigger the dream, the more the fear around it.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. But that's life, right?
And the larger the resistance, the more difficult it is to tackle, and then the more toxicity you experience by ignoring it. Like everything gets ratcheted up. But it's like the universe is knocking on your door, saying you got to wake up and pay attention to this.
Yes, but what is the dream? The dream is some sort of unfolding of who you are. If it's a company that you want to start, if it's a nonprofit, it's a podcast, if it's an ultra endurance thing, that's your soul unfolding, yourself unfolding and revealing in a good way, revealing like a flower blooming, revealing what's there. And that's what we're here to do, I think. So whatever the pain is, that's life to get to there.
Right. Well, how do you communicate that to somebody who to go back to the example of somebody who's not in a tremendous amount of pain, to tell that person, you're here to express who you uniquely are. He's like, I'm banking a good paycheck. I lease a nice car. Like, what do you mean?
I really don't like to answer that question, and it kind of bothers me when people ask me that question, and there is no answer to it. It's when they hit bottom, when they're really ready, then they'll do it, and they won't do it before that.
Right. So another reason to get out of the way and allow them their own.
Exactly. I think
process.
It's one of the most thankless things in the world to try to help someone in a state like that, because like when they're ready, when I'm ready, when you're ready, we'll do it.
The mentor will present himself or herself.
Yeah.
So walk me through a day in your life in terms of how you structure things so that it's conducive to your art.
Well, let me take you back pre-COVID, because it's a little different than now. I'm slacking off a little more than I should.
Oh, wow. I would have thought it would have been the opposite.
No. But pre-COVID, and when we get back to this, I'm like a gym person, and I would get up really, really early and go into Gold's in Venice, and work out hard, not as hard as you, but hard for me.
Probably harder these days.
And then I'd go to breakfast every morning, with a bunch of guys my age, a bunch of geezers that I hang out with, and then I'd go home. It's now maybe 8:30, something like that. Take care of whatever correspondence there is, whatever emails, as little as possible, and then I'll sit down and really do the work, whatever it is, and turn everything off, and lock the door, etc. And I used to be able to work for 4 hours. Now I can maybe work for 3. And then when I'm done with that, I'll clean up whatever needs to be done. And then I'm from the school of the office is closed after that. I turn off my brain. I don't dwell on it. I don't think. I leave it up to the muse, and just do whatever we can in the evening. Go to dinner, something like that, and start again the next day.
Do you
and
still
very
keep
definitely thinking of it over a year at a time.
Do you still use the paper calendar?
Oh yeah, I do that. Yeah,
and you mark down your
you've done your
workouts
research
or how many hours you wrote that day, that
which
kind of
is
thing?
important, I think, to record what you did that day. Not in great detail or anything, but just it's a little bit like journaling. Only I just do it really simple. I just say, I worked on this. I worked this many hours. Enough. Boom. I did it.
Right.
And somehow that nails it down. I kind of say. And I do that with workouts too. I'll kind of say, well, what did I do today? I mean, you probably do that too, Rich, right? When you write it down because it sinks in.
Yeah. Also, if you're working towards a goal, like so the equivalent would be there's a race on the calendar, or this is when you have to turn the manuscript on, right? And you kind of backpedal from there and fill in the calendar going backwards, knowing what you need to do. But like there's something about the tactile experience of writing it down as opposed to just knowing it or having it in a digital calendar that not only makes it more real, but also just it enhances your emotional attachment and engagement to the whole process, I think.
I mean, for me, it's self-reinforcement. I don't have any boss or sergeant at the end of the day that says to me, good job, Steve, you did that. So I got to do that myself, right? And it's the same way. And for me, when I write it down that I did this workout or I did this, that's kind of, if I can look at a calendar, I got a month there and I can see check mark, I can see like 30 check marks. I go, that's pretty good. And if I have big gaps, I go, oh man, I better, crank it up a little bit here. But I think we need all the reinforcement we can get.
Yeah. How much of that regimented mentality, I mean, you were in the Marines, right? Does it come from military experience?
Not really, no. I think it just comes from doing the work in the real world.
Right. And you just figured out your own way for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got in my closet, I've got calendars going back to like 19
and you keep them
wherever.
All, right?
Yeah, I keep them, yeah.
Well, let's talk about the new book. A Man at Arms is coming out in March. This is quite the adventure. It's your return to the ancient world after a spell, and this great character that shows up in many of your books, Telamon, who's this archetypal silent warrior figure. And I'm about 100 pages into it. I'm really enjoying it. And what's amazing to me reading this is just the level of detail. Like I really feel like I am in, first century Judea, and your command over what that would feel like, what it would smell like, the experience of being in that place is unbelievable. Like the amount of research I can't imagine that you would have had to put into being able to fully grok like what that world was like at that time.
Well, of course, a lot of it is fiction, a lot of it, you're trying to just kind of create a world. Like if you were creating the world of Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, right? You're creating a world. But I spent a bunch of time in Israel researching another book. And so that kind of gave me, and in Jerusalem, so that kind of gave me a feel for what it's actually like there, what it feels like, and towards Sinai, the Sinai Desert where this story takes place. And, but, Actually, right now, I'm reading The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway's book it's just like the 10th time I've read it. And he is an absolute master of detail and stuff like that. And like if he's talking about, they're going fishing, and he talks about how they walk over this hill, and there was a church on the side, and then the water went over the stiles and the dam like that, and we had the fish, and we got the ferns. We laid the ferns down, and the layers of fish on top of them, and then we dug up the worm. And as you're reading it, layer and layer and layer of detail, you really get immersed in it, and particularly when they're visual details. So that you say, wow, I feel like, I'm there. I'm fishing with the guy. I know exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
So I definitely very much try to do that. It's like a movie, right? If Ridley Scott is blocking out a scene, I mean, there's nothing in that scene that's an accident, right? Every prop, every ray of light, everything is, the smoke, whatever it is there to immerse you, the reader, and create, or the viewer, and create the illusion that you're actually there.
So when you were in Israel, did you sort of drive south and track this route a little bit to get a sense of the landscape?
I didn't, because you couldn't cross into Egypt. But I did as far as you could go in Israel, yeah. But I wasn't thinking about this. This book came like 4 years after the other one. But, everything is grist for the mill. And what I learned in Israel sort of, it's all in the computer somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I love the kind of structural setup of the mute little girl and the warrior. And you know that this relationship is going to flower. You wrote a blog post about this. It's all about like, how do you get to I love you? And you can see that coming. And it feels to me, I mean, it's very cinematic. It's sort of like, it's like Gladiator meets The Road or something like that, as they
good. I like that.
traipse across this landscape, on this crazy adventure that has a lot to do with, the early years of Christianity and the Roman Empire, and it's beautifully rendered.
I mean, you were talking about Get To I Love You. Let me just talk about that just for a second, because it's sort of your entertainment background, I'm sure you've heard this or thought about this, but a lot of stories, a lot of movies are basically about get to I love you, by which I mean the final moment that we're building to. Let me go back a minute. You start with two characters that are as far apart as you can possibly make them, right? They hate each other, or for whatever reason, they're opposite. It's a cop, it's a criminal, if it's a love story, it's the guy and the gal, whatever it is. And the whole point of the story is to get them to the point where they can, if not literally say, I love you, there's a gesture or something like that at the end. And when we're watching this or reading it, like you say, you could see it coming, that's sort of what kind of pulls us through the story, because we know it's going to happen at the end.
Yeah, you know it, and yet you can't look away. It's like this tractor.
You
beam.
Want it,
Right.
And again, our life is like that, right? It's we meet somebody and we're trying to, whether we want to or not, come to some understanding, come to some bond. And that's kind of what keeps it going. And I think that if you look at it at the deepest level, if you want to look at it at a level of faith or spirituality, it's God. It's getting to the belief in a loving divinity, or if you want to stay at a lower level of just human to human, that's getting to the point where love is greater than fear or greater than anger. And if we want to be in politics today, we're in the United States as far away from that as we could possibly be. And I think we all want that but we don't know how to get there.
Well, does it not
begin? Change it to politics.
Yeah, well, it begins with a willingness to try to grapple with, that dormant higher self within, right? And one of the ways that you've kind of gotten at that subject is by analogizing it to golf, like this idea of the authentic swing. Like no matter who you are, like everybody has their own swing. You can never master anybody else's swing. If you try to change your swing, you can't do it. Everybody has their default swing, right? And that's sort of a metaphor for our unique blueprint that we all come into the earth with. And are on this path to expressing that.
Yeah, our authentic self.
Right.
And in this story, A Man at Arms, the book that you have in front of you there, it's really the hero, Telamon, who's like this one-man killing machine of the ancient world, like the Clint Eastwood Man with No Name. You can tell at the start of the story, he's this ultra hardcore kind of solitary warrior that he's looking for some it's not, he isn't complete. His philosophy is too dark. It's too selfish. It's too ego-driven. And so the point of kind of get to I love you through that story is, I won't spoil anything for you, but that's kind of what the evolution that you can feel is inside him. He's trying to get to his authentic self, whatever it is, and he's not there yet.
Right.
And
he's
and
got
I think
all these layers.
Stories are about that.
He's got all these layers, protective layers around him. He's a man without a country. He's there for the dollar, and he's a survivor, right? He's able to make his way in the world in accordance with his warrior code, but he's an outcast, and so there's something missing, right? And this girl, you know, is going to complete that for him.
Which is really sort of a classic character. It's like a classic Raymond Chandler Private Eye is sort of that kind of
it is a
character.
Western.
Yep, it is a Western.
Way, yeah.
Absolutely is a Western. Or a Clint Eastwood character in a Western, or a John Wick character in a contemporary thing is, you know, it's a similar sort of thing. It's like in movies, we've seen this character, we've seen that story, but it's always fresh and it's always new.
Well, you're a big proponent of stealing what works and using those as templates to create structure for your work with the Bhagavad Gita and Bagger Vance. Was there something that you relied upon for A Man at Arms?
Definitely. I mean, I definitely...
I'm not going to say.
Well, I'll say a little, at least a little. I certainly thought of it absolutely as a Western, even though it's set in the 1st century AD. And the reason that I wanted it to be kind of a journey across the Sinai Desert was I thought that's kind of like The Road Warrior, the post-apocalyptic, or a Clint Eastwood or a John Wayne movie where there's always the wide open, the cruel, lawless wasteland, right? Where
you're going to happen upon marauders and all kinds of crazy obstacles.
Which is again sort of like the hero's journey that you or I go through, right? Or it all even comes back to being a writer or being an endurance athlete. It's a kind of a wasteland that the individual sort of enters for his own reason and undergoes ordeals towards some form of transformation at the end. And so I definitely thought of this absolutely as a Western, and even watched Westerns, like you do when you're writing movies. You're trying to, what can I steal from the Wild Bunch? What can I steal from the Searchers? So, so I definitely thought of it that way.
And why do you keep going back to Telamon as this character? He recurs in your work time and time again. Like, what is it about this guy that you just feel so connected to that you have to keep writing about?
It's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it, because in some way, this is the character of all the characters that I've written about that I feel the closest kinship to in some way. And I also never planned this character. He's been in like 3 other books, and he just sort of appeared on the page, and he appeared in fully formed, like he had a philosophy. When he would start to talk, and I wasn't in charge of that, he had a philosophy, and I sort of thought to myself, I wonder I wish I could talk to him. What does he think below that? Why did he think that? Why does he believe this? And so I don't know. There must be something in me that relates. It's a metaphor somehow. I'm not sure what it is. Telamon appears, not to go too deep into this, but he appears, he can't seem to die. He appears in one century and he comes back in another century, and he hasn't aged. And he's in a whole different place. So he's sort of like somebody that's stuck in an archetype, like the universal soldier that's condemned to come back and fight war after war after war. Right. And I mean, in a way, that's
like kung fu.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about that, but that's it. Or a lot of these Western heroes are sort of timeless archetypes, right? A Clint Eastwood character or something like that. They it seems like they fought in war after war after war, and they're going to do it again. So somehow, again, I don't know the answer to this question, Rich. I don't know why he's fascinating to me, but just like you were talking about doing another book of Finding Ultra, I know I'm going to have to do another book
with this guy,
with
right?
Telamon, and I'm dreading having to actually get to that deep level.
Well, what I see in the character is a guy whose experiences in the world have maybe not embittered him, but calcified him, right? And out of self-preservation has created these protective walls around him. He's not going to allow his emotions to be impacted by anything external. So he's effective in surviving and has these aspirational warrior abilities, and yet he's broken and in pain, right? And so there's an opportunity to heal that somehow, and that can take shape in any number of journeys that this person goes on.
Yeah. I mean, there's a moment where, as you know, he takes on an apprentice, a young boy,
right?
And they have a couple of mules as they're crossing this desert. And at some point, Telamon says something kind to the young boy about the mules. And the boy says, "Shall we name them? Should we give them names, these mules?" And he says, "No." He says, "I'm sorry, I even know your name."
Right. But the kid was so excited that Telamon was even talking to him, because this is the silent, strong, silent guy who's clearly the mentor who's going to teach this young person his ways of the world, but he's going to do it sparingly and only when he feels like doing it. Right?
Yeah.
Cool. So the book comes out late March, right?
Or March 2nd.
March 2nd. Yeah, that's exciting. So I'm sure you'd be doing some other podcasts and talking about it. It's very cinematic too. Has there been any interest from
not yet
the movie business yet?
I don't know if anybody even knows it exists yet.
Do you still keep a toe in that world? Or no?
Not really. I let my subscription to the Hollywood Reporter lapse when like 5 years went by and I never saw my name in it.
Do you still have like a talent agent in Hollywood or any? Or that's all,
I don't. I have a books to movies agent in New York, Jody Hotchkiss, but I don't have. You know how it is when your hair turns gray, your career's over in Hollywood as a screenwriter.
Look at Ridley Scott. You just talked about him. The guy's like 80. He's got 2 massive movies that he's shooting like back to back coming up. I think.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, how old is Ridley now?
He's definitely
81 or something.
Yeah, he's definitely in his 80s.
God bless him.
Insane, right?
God bless him.
Well, I do want to. Can we tell the story about Frank Williger and Bagger? Because it's so good. And I think it...
How do you know Frank's name in this?
I told you I was an entertainment lawyer. Some roots back in that. Because I think it's inspiring and instructive about what it means to honor that voice within you and dial out the external voices that are perhaps leading you astray.
Well, Frank Williger was my agent, and he's a wonderful guy. And we were friends. And the way that we used to work is because I was basically a spec screenwriter. I'd write something on spec. And if I'd had 2 or 3 ideas, I'd go into Frank's office and he would give me like 2 hours and I'd pitch him the ideas. And he would tell me, no, you can't do that. Fox is doing a movie like that now, or he'd kind of give me the marketplace take on things. So anyway, I went into him one day. The idea for The Legend of Bagger Vance came to me just out of nowhere. I was seized by it, my first book. And I said to him, "Frank, I've got good news and bad news. And the good news is I've got a new idea. I'm really hot to do it. And the bad news is it's a book. It's not a movie." And so Frank had been really working hard on my behalf to kind of get me out there into the town and people knew who I was. So he was completely pissed off at me, because he said, "I've done all this work. If you take a year off to write a book, all that work is down the tubes, And so I asked him, "Can you help me get an agent in New York, a literary agent?" And basically, he basically fired me. He just wouldn't do it,
Yeah.
And so I just said, screw this. I'm writing it. I don't care. I'm just seized by it. And so we parted ways at that point. And I went ahead and wrote the book.
The idea being like, what do you mean you're going to write a book? Like I just put all this work into, cultivating your
he's right.
Your
he was right.
In the screenwriting business, and it's going to be about golf.
Yeah, about golf.
It's like, no, that's not going to work. And you walk away from all of those opportunities when, you were getting some success and on the precipice of really breaking through in a big way, to go off on this crazy tangent to write this book, and everybody told you were insane.
And I told myself that too.
What was that? Like, what was going on inside of you that felt so compelled to make that decision?
I was just seized by this story, Rich. I just, and when I look back on that, today I would really block out a story and figure out, that with that book, I just kind of just let it go, and even when I look at it now, it's structured in a really kind of crazy way, but I think it works. At least the book works. I don't think the movie worked, but I was just seized by it. I had no choice. I just had to do it.
In the Authentic Swing, you talk about, it's sort of a behind the scenes look at how the book came about and ultimately the movie came about. What is it about? Can you speak to how golf works for you as this analogy for these other ideas? Because it does, like, it's counterintuitive, and yet it completely makes sense when you explain it.
First of all, I know that people who are not into golf, it seems like the dopiest sport in the world.
Yeah, I'm not into. I'm not into golf at all. Like, I have a hard time understanding. Although I watched the Tiger documentary and I was riveted by that.
Well, they say about golf, and it's really, really true, that with almost any other sport, if you don't play it and you see it, like, say, motor racing or surfing or mountain climbing, even if you don't play it, you can look at it and go, oh, that looks kind of cool. Look at Laird Hamilton going down that, but golf is an exception. You look at golf, you go, it's a bunch of white guys, wearing plaid pants. It seems like the fat guys, it's Donald Trump. It's like the most boring, but trust me, it's a great sport. And to prove it, Michael Jordan loves it. John Elway loves it, Tom Brady. So anyway, the one thing about golf, you were talking about the Authentic Swing before, is like, I had two friends when I was a kid, identical twins who played golf. And the amazing thing to me was they had completely different golf swings. And I thought, shouldn't they have the exact same swing? They're the same DNA. And it is true that in some crazy way, we're born with a swing. Before we ever pick up a club, you have a swing, I have a swing, everybody around here has a swing. And you cannot change that swing. If you think about golfers like Fred Couples or Jim Furyk that have these crazy loopy swings, they didn't evolve that through study. So to me, the idea of the authentic swing and finding your authentic swing is the equivalent of your authentic self. It's what we were talking about before about being born with a gift, and that's it. And so a lot of us, like in golf, people will try to mold themselves into some perfect kind of a swing, and it never works. And the real answer is, if you can, to find your own authentic swing and then, fine tune it so that you don't have bad habits in there. And so I think that's the same thing in writing, in art, or anything in life, is finding who we are. We already are that thing. And if we can just find it and be it. But that's the hardest thing in the world. That's why they say know thyself is like the hardest thing in the world to do.
Right. But that's what we're here to do, right? And to extend the golf metaphor, there is this truth in that it's not about anyone other than yourself and your relationship with yourself. Like it is the ultimate individual sport, right? And this idea that you talk about of I forget how you phrase it exactly, but most athletes are reacting without a forethought in the moment, whether they're, hitting a backhand or, blocking a jump shot. But in golf, there's stillness, which forces you to, engage with your thinking mind, which moves you away from the ability to execute on what you're there to do. And it's all about the process of getting out of your own way, right? And that goes back to the stripping away thing in Bagger with, the who are you question, to eradicate all the noise so that you can be fully present.
Yes. And like, as you're saying, golf is one of the few sports, maybe shooting a free throw or kicking a field goal is a parallel, where you do it from a standing start. like you say, in basketball, you're reacting to somebody, or tennis, the ball's coming, you react to it. And it's easier to do that in motion. It's easier to do it. But from a standing start where your brain starts working, but then there's a whole other aspect of golf that was in this book, The Authentic Swing. And this is kind of a crazy thing, and it gets spiritual, is that there's really no other sport where you have a caddy, where you have another person standing at your shoulder that technically is your servant, right? You're paying them to carry the bag. But as we all know, the bond between the caddy and a golfer is tremendous. And in the Bhagavad Gita, where you have the great warrior Arjuna, his charioteer is Krishna, i.e. God in human form. And that was the parallel that I drew. So God appears as a servant at your side and a kind of an advisor. And I think that a lot of Christians who believe in a personal savior related to the character of Bagger Vance that way. But I also do think, if you think about, I know we're getting into deep waters here.
This is the stuff I love the most.
If you think about the Odyssey and Odysseus, as he's on his journey, people forget about this. He's accompanied by the goddess Athena, and he talks to her all the time, and she intercedes for him. And anybody that Martin Luther King or somebody would talk to Jesus all the time, like it was at his shoulder. And so the same thing with Arjuna, the great warrior, and Krishna is at his side as an instructor and as a divine archetype. And I do think, this is when I say I believe in the muse, and although resistance is the negative side of it, the goddess is the positive side of it. That, when I said I was seized by the story of Bagger Vance and had to write it, that's what that was. It was coming from another. So that was the equivalent of Krishna at your shoulder, or Athena, or Jesus, or whatever. Some entity from another dimension of reality, from a dimension of potentiality. Where do songs come from? Where do ideas come from? Where do books come from? I think there's a lot of reality. So back to golf. The idea in golf that you have this person at your shoulder that guides you. And you can see, if you watch a golf tournament, you watch Phil Mickelson or Tiger or whatever, they turn to the caddy all the time. The caddy saves them, In other sports, you don't have. Michael Jordan can't stop and confer with, or anything like that, right? So I do think that there's a real spiritual aspect to that, or at least a metaphor for something spiritual.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why the Tiger documentary was so interesting, hearing the perspective of his caddy. Have you seen that documentary yet?
Yeah, I did,
And then when Tiger fires him and the guy's like, it's such a sacred relationship.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be a real turning point in terms of how Tiger was approaching the world at that point in his life.
I think so.
Yeah.
And Dustin Johnson, I don't know if he's like number one or whatever he is now. His brother is his caddy. And they've been and he's a real good player too, his brother Austin. And somehow that's, in a way, a secret to his success, that you can see these two brothers are, really in it together. It's not a one-man fight, it's a two-man fight.
Right. So what happened with the movie, Bagger Vance? It kind of went sideways, didn't it?
Yeah, it went sideways. I don't know.
I mean, such an amazing cast. Redford directing. You got Matt Damon, Will Smith, Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
Sometimes these things just don't work, right?
One thing I'll say is, I think golf is an impossible story to film. There's only been one good golf movie, and that was Caddyshack. Just a total farce. It's a hard thing to do. I don't want to say anything negative about anybody.
Did Golf in the Kingdom ever get made into a film?
I think it did, but it was a very small movie that I actually have the disc. I've never been able to put it in the
When
machine.
I was a lawyer, I was involved in, I can't remember who I was representing. I think a producer who was trying to acquire the rights or something like that, but I never knew that it got made.
Yeah. I mean, that's another impossible movie to make because it's so internal.
Yeah. How do you manifest that cinematically? Right. All right. Well, we gotta wind this down, but I wanna end on or maybe two things.
We can't stay here all day, Rich.
We can. I'm happy to talk to you. I want to be conscious of your time. Where does talent fall into all of this?
That's a great question. I'm really not a believer in talent. I mean, I think that, now I've said this before, people tell me, oh, I'm a talent. But for 30 years, they told me I was a bum. And I was a bum because I hadn't learned. I didn't know what I was doing. I think obviously you have to have some sort of a gift, right? If you're going to be a runner, you have to have a certain amount of speed, right? But I certainly think in like you and I are grinders, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that work is, for me, 80% of it, maybe more, 85% of it. On the other hand, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, they got talent.
Yeah.
Up the yin yang.
There are people that have
God bless
talent.
them. There are people that do have incredible talent.
But there's also a lot of, I mean, you've been in this town a long time. There's a lot of incredibly talented people here who aren't fully expressed or recognized for what they do for other reasons.
Yeah.
So it isn't always a function of
their
that.
Talent works against them.
Right.
We certainly see it in athletics, right? You have a lot of players that come out or they're drafted in the first round for whatever it is, and they fizzle. And then Tom Brady was drafted whatever he was. I forget what he was, but way, way, way at the back.
Right.
Turns out to be the greatest player of all time.
Yeah.
So talent can be a negative if you're relying on it too much. If you're a basketball player, football player, and you got speed, you got size, maybe you don't have to do the work.
Sure. But I think we over-index for talent and we underappreciate the grinders.
Yeah,
And I think, in so many pursuits, whether it's writing or anything else, often the prize goes to the guy who just refuses to walk off the field and just keeps showing up and keeps showing up. Look how long it took you to get your first book published. I see that time and time again. And it's not sexy. Like that's not the growth hack that everybody's looking for.
Yeah.
It's the hardest way to do it, but you learn along the way so that when your persistence meets with some sliver of opportunity, you're more prepared than you would have been ordinarily.
Yeah. But again, there's no substitute for that flash from above,
Yeah.
When it comes in. But then that's when the grinding pays off because you're ready. You've built the tools for it. And when the inspiration comes, you're capable of handling it.
Yeah. Well, it's a good news, bad news thing, is it not? Like bad news, maybe you're not that talented. Good news, you can learn to grind. Like this is a skill set that you can develop that's accessible to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And if you can master that, then you're putting yourself way ahead of 99% of people out there who just aren't willing to put in the work. So it's really a function of like, how badly do you want it?
Exactly.
And that goes back to the pain thing, right? Yeah, are you in enough pain?
Yeah.
I hope you are, because it's going to be a long road.
Yeah.
So what is if somebody's watching or listening to this, you probably hate this question, but if they're sitting there thinking, I got this thing I want to write, or I have this idea that I want to execute on, and I've been unable to get out of my own way, but it's like right there for the taking. Like, how do you get people off the dime?
Again, as I said, it's the most thankless thing in the world, because if somebody's not ready to do it, like I wasn't ready forever and forever and forever. Nobody, anything someone said to me would roll right off me. But when I was ready, and you don't have any clue when that's going to be, I think, then it happened. So one thing I would say to people, and it's usually younger people, is that, this is what a friend of mine once said to me. People always tell you that life is short, but actually life is long. And if you're 24 years old or 34 years old, I mean, when I was 34 years old, I was still 21 years away from having a book published, even though I've been busting my ass for all that. So if I would say to a younger person, take some pressure off yourself. You don't have to, it's all this bullshit in the social media that there's a hack and you can do it tomorrow. It's, enjoy the trip, pay attention, keep your eyes open on the journey. When it's ready to happen, it'll happen.
That's really powerful advice, I think. I think it also is about rebutting all these cultural and social influences on people. Outside of the hacks, it's just like, here's the path that's laid out in front of you. And if you want to be successful, you go to this school or you get this job and you work hard, and, success looks like X, right? Where in truth, only in your heart of hearts, underneath all of these layers, what that's going to look like for you. And that might take time. But there is something to be said, and a lack of appreciation for, doing a walkabout, which is essentially what you did, which was your own, sort of Telemon soul journey of self-discovery in order to return and come back to engage with your personal truth. But it took time, and it took you trying lots of different things and giving yourself permission to do that. And I think that's something that more people perhaps did in earlier ages, which is really frowned upon now.
Yeah, it is.
And in truth, when you look at life and say, it is long, why are you in such a hurry? There's this idea that if you have to take 1 year of school over, or you're going to take a gap year, that suddenly you've missed out and the world is going to pass you by, is fucking bullshit. And it's not in people's best interests or in service to, really trying to self-actualize by telling people that.
Yeah, there's so much pressure on everybody today I'm glad I'm not, I don't want to say I don't want to be young, but it's if you're a young person today, the pressure that's put on you, and the what's out there in the zeitgeist is, it's artificial, it's false. It doesn't coincide with our inner reality, with our soul reality. And we have to somehow disabuse ourselves, free ourselves, break out of this spell that's been cast on us.
Yeah, it's very limiting, and it's fear-based too, right? It's betting on you being too afraid to do any, the cost of breaking outside of this norm is too high.
Yeah.
And most people aren't willing to pay that because of the social consequences.
And of course, in my thinking about myself, it wasn't like I decided to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I screwed up and it happened to me.
Yeah.
So
and I think people are, there's this expectation that when you're 18, you're supposed to know what it is that you want to do. It's just preposterous, right?
Yeah.
And if you haven't figured that out yet, what's the matter with you? It takes a little bit longer,
18, 28, 38, keep going. Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. How do you feel? I think we did a good job.
I got to say, thanks to you, Rich, for being so prepared and, making me think here. And I was really looking forward to meeting you and to having this experience. And it's been, everything that I hoped it would be. And I hope that we can, keep something going here. And, if I haven't totally exhausted, we haven't totally wrung out the lemon, squeezed the lemon.
I'm just still trying to calm my nerves over just having the opportunity to meet you. You being here today is incredibly meaningful to me. And I mean that with all of my heart.
Likewise. It's been great.
It's really special for me, and I appreciate you, and I hope that we can become friends, and I'd love to have you back on whenever you want to come back on and talk.
Consider it done. I mean, anytime. If there's any juice left in the lemon, we can squeeze it.
Look at you. I could try to extract lemon juice from you for the rest of my life, and we'd never get to the bottom of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Real
so
pleasure.
much. It was great. Steve's new book is called A Man at Arms, available March 2nd, out everywhere you find
pretty much everywhere.
Books. Check it out. It's really a great read. Thank you for putting that book out there. And if you're interested in all of the things that we're talking about today, pick up The War of Art, Turning Pro. Nobody wants to read your shit. You got all, do the work. You got all these great books. Regardless of how it feels to shoulder this moniker, you are a guru of creative expression, and you've helped millions of people, myself included, and I can't thank you enough. So come on back and talk to me.
All right. That's great, Rich. Thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to meet you and to be here, and I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. Also, if you want to connect with Steve, StephenPressfield.com.
Yeah.
And on you're on Twitter and all those places, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I think on Instagram it's Stephen_Pressfield, but I'm sure you can
and
find
then
it.
on
There's only
Twitter,
one.
Stephen Pressfield.
I don't even know.
You don't know. Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Peace. Lance.